r/AskReddit. Serious men who have experienced sexual assault/abuse. What happened and how are you doing now? I've only ever told this story once to my fiancé. When I was little, my mom would drop me off at her friend's house when she went to work. I spend most of the time with my mom's friends' kids, a girl and boy who are 3 and 5 years older than me respectively. One night when I spent the night, it was me and the girl in her room. I don't really remember how it started, but eventually she started kissing me and she took off her clothes. She told me to do the same and I did. She was bigger than me and I was afraid of what she'd do if I didn't. She got on top of me and, well, I'm sure you can figure out where I'm going with this. Eventually I asked her to get off because I had to go to the restroom. She reluctantly got off and let me get dressed and go to the restroom. When I got back, she told me if I told anyone what happened, she'd get me in trouble. So didn't tell anyone. It wasn't till I was 13 to 14 that I realized what had really happened. I've moved since it happened. Haven't seen her in almost a decade. I can't really say how it affected me since I don't remember much before it happened. I don't even know how she knew about sex or what it was. I was 6 and she was 9. When I was 12, by a female nurse giving me a physical exam. After a normal checkup, she had me strip naked, fondled me until I got an erection, then fingered my anus. I actually posted the story on a Reddit thread about fetishes and people immediately pointed out that the nurse had sexually assaulted me. I'd always had doubts about what happened, so it was good to have knowledgeable people confirm my suspicions. Doing fine now. Getting confirmation of the abuse didn't really change anything for me. I'm almost 50 now. I feel like I moved on and would not benefit from revisiting it too much. I got too drunk. She was a friend that helped me home because she was sober. Woke up the next day naked with her in my bed. She tried to say because we had sex I needed to break up with my long-term girlfriend and date her instead, or she'd tell my girlfriend. So instead I told my girlfriend the truth and she broke up with me. That was like 2.5 years ago. And it was a real rough time after that for the next 2 years or so. Since then I've changed a lot in my life and even found a new girlfriend who is currently sleeping next to me. I told her this story just the other day after 8 months of dating. She called it a one night stand. So that was rough. But most people don't take it seriously. So I've been lucky enough to experience this multiple times in my life despite being a guy. As it turns out, contrary to popular belief, it's not uncommon for people sexually assaulted and abused to be re-victimized. In fact, the greatest predictor of being sexually assaulted is having already been assaulted. Earliest instance I can remember was 3 years old by my dad. Just touching, fondling, and other adult attention. It went on until I was 9 or 10. My memory is really hazy on it. Despite being really uncomfortable and weird, I didn't think much about it because lots of things don't make any sense when you're that age. Plus it was my parent and had been happening my whole life, so it seemed normal. Next time was when I was 11. I was in an empty public restroom and some man walked in and picked the urinal next to mine, which I knew was weird. Guy starts talking to me and I just wanted to get out of there. At some point he called out, "Hey kid, look at this," and had his erect penis in his hand. I don't remember anything after that, but my mom said she suspected something, even though I never told her, because the guy bolted out of the restroom after several minutes, and I was acting weird for the rest of the day. Finally, when I was 25, I was working in a lab, had my boss/mentor threaten to fire me/sabotage me if I didn't have a relationship with her. I should mention she was already married at the time and had a husband she said would kill me if he found out, so that was fun too. Anyway, I was applying to MD/PhD programs and getting fired would have been the end of that career, so her threat was enough to get me to go along. Very often she'd claim we had no work in the lab, so why not hang out at my place? I usually tried to weasel my way out of it, though eventually she'd insist. Often I'd refuse, and she'd do shit anyway. All I could really do was keep saying stop, which she just completely ignored. Sometimes I hit/kick to get her off of me, which didn't work because I had to hold back. Don't want to explain why I gave my boss a black eye. She'd just pretend she didn't notice and keep going. Sometimes I was driving so I couldn't safely do anything either. One time when I was drunk and high, long story, trying to keep this short, she pulled down my pants on the sofa, pinned my arms above my head, and told me to lick her fingers, because she was going to anally penetrate me. I refused because I didn't want to give her any impression I was consenting, but she did it anyway, while I begged her not to. That shit went on for over a year, until I got a new job out of state. She was still in my life, even after I cut her out, until I was 30, when I finally got a restraining order against her. 31 now, and haven't heard from her since. Anyway, after effects: severe depression, anxiety, PTSD, and zero desire for sex. Thousands of dollars and the majority of my life seeing therapists and psychiatrists. After the adulthood shit got really bad, I was thinking about all of this stuff literally all of the time, and looping memories endlessly. Literally every goddamn minute I was awake, and I truly mean literally. It was debilitating and exhausting, and sometimes I considered suicide just to make it stop. After a couple years I started to think about it less and less, and now I go days without thinking about it, which I'm fine with. My depression and anxiety ebb and flow. They got a lot better last year, but things have deteriorated again in the last several months. More positive, I successfully changed careers to something I love a lot more, and that's much better paying, so that worked out in the end. The big thing is that I'm just glad all of what happened is in the past. So often I'd dream of a day when it was over and I could just have a normal life, and it seemed so far off. I'm just so glad that day is here. I was 9 years old. It started when I got overly curious about porn. My father constantly watched it. I wondered so many things. He started explaining to me what function was what. Then it led from that to him showing me how to get a stiffy. That led into him helping me often. To him wanting helped often with him. Then it turned into, do you want to do what they are doing on the screen, the penetration? That was very painful, very horrible. I've mostly blanked out the majority of it, but get flashbacks of things. It's been rough. It's screwed up my life. I had a GF once. I never had sex with her. She met my father when we was all at a reunion. Soon after she was having sex with him. His excuse was, you would have done the same to me. No, I would not have. So that was 2005 when I ditched her and pushed him fully out of my life. But I've not dated since then, not had sex at all. I'm 40 now. I have bad trust issues. I won't go about asking anyone out. I'm really broken. I want kids, a wife, happiness. But trust, the fact that I have mental scares just. Edit. Thank you kind stranger for the gold. Okay, I've spilled what I wanted to here. I was groomed and molested / raped by my older brother when I was 8 and he was 15. I'm gay, and for so long, I thought that it was caused by the abuse. I obviously learned there's no relationship between those two, but it was agonizing. I told my parents a couple of years ago. I was actually closest to him and his wife out of my 5 brothers, and when it all came out they both just denied it and didn't speak to me for a couple of years. I don't really care that they denied it, but it was agonizing to not be able to go to them. I'm from a politically conservative family and my brother, and his wife are the only progressives. His wife is also the only person in our family to go to graduate school, and she always inspired me. We saw each other last fall for my grandparents' anniversary party, and it was really awkward. He and my sister-in-law came to my college graduation party yesterday, which my dad failed to mention to me beforehand, and it just made me miserable because I wanted things to be the way they used to be. I would have hung out with them the entire time and laughed a lot and actually enjoyed myself, but that didn't happen. I forgave him a long time ago, long before I told my parents, and the only reason I told my parents was because I was concerned something had happened to my other brother as well. I wish I hadn't told anyone. Family functions are completely ruined, and I imagine it will be that way for the rest of my life. I was somewhere between 5 and 7. I don't remember exactly when it happened. I was left in the care of a family member, and he performed oral sex on me and made me do it to him. I remember being so confused. I thought he was going to pee in my mouth. The most damaging part was the shame trip he laid on me when it was over. He told me what we'd just done was very shameful, and we'd both get in a lot of trouble if anyone found out. That shame has haunted me ever since, and I'm in my 40s. This was set against a backdrop of never-ending emotional and sometimes physical abuse, both at home and elsewhere, that went on into my teenage years. Because of that, it's hard to separate the incident out and say how much of my trauma was caused by this as opposed to the rest. But I have lived every day of my life in constant emotional distress. I suffer from anxiety and depression, and my therapist believes I have PTSD as well. I finally have a mental health team that I believe can help me really heal, but it's had an absolutely devastating impact on my quality of life. 07th do not recommend. I was very young. I was probably 3 or 4 at the time. My 2 uncles on my father's side molested me when my aunt was supposed to be babysitting me. At that time they were both teenagers. I still remember it also even at the age of 36. I came to accept what happened to me. I'm pretty open to share it with others because I believe there are a lot of us who experienced sexual abuse. I don't forgive the guys that molested me. They can burn in hell for all I care, but I do know that none of what happened to me was my fault. I made the 101 mistake of dating someone from work. I was really extroverted before I started dating this girl. I really got on with both staff and customers and loved my job. Life was fun, and I was happy. Anyway, my girlfriend didn't like this, and slowly took control. Wouldn't let me speak to women, would go into my phone all the time without my knowledge, and at one point she even forced me to take photos of receipts to prove I went grocery shopping and not met anyone on the way. So why didn't I break up? She would make a scene at work, ensure something would happen, and that I would be blamed. This got even worse when I told a friend at work what was going on. They spread the rumor around, which eventually got to her. All hell broke loose. I couldn't quit my job because it was the height of a recession and it was my first job out of college, where I'd been unemployed for nearly a year beforehand. After forcing me to have sex over a few months, alcohol was a godsend there. The abuse became physical. I ended up with a black eye point anyway. To cut the story short, she found out I had a couple of friends I confided in who happened to be gay. A blessing in disguise. It meant the rumor spread around that I cheated on her with another man. She got to be the victim and 95% of my colleagues started giving me dirty looks and ignored me. I kept my head down. She got a promotion, but I was free. I did tell someone else what happened afterwards, but they just said you should never get on a wrong side of a woman. I think I became a little bitter at work after that, especially when the yearly anti-bullying posters and bring yourself to work drives went on. I eventually left that job, but stayed in the same organization. I'm in a really good place career-wise now. It has changed me. I'm now extremely independent but terrible in relationships and social circles. I find it hard to be myself or feel vulnerable with people. I always have my guard up and feel ready to be on the defensive when needed. I'm also somewhat reserved at work and never really let people know me socially. I miss being extroverted, but I hope one day that'll all come back in time. But hey, I survived. I'd love it if you liked and subscribed.